Well, he's retiring from the state police. It caught some people by surprise, but he's here to explain the whole rationale.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
So was this just, it's time type of thing, or were there some issues that caused this to happen, I think, for the public's perception, somewhat prematurely? You never know whose timetable is really the correct one, but we'll find out all of those answers, I hope. I hope we'll get some of those answers with the Colonel of the State Police, Stephen O'Donnell, has been kind enough to share some time with us this evening on the Friday program. And as you know, if you're a regular viewer, and thank you, over the last 3 years, we've built a lot of them. I appreciate it. Spread the word. That we record the program on Friday on Thursday evening, so we tend not to opine about Friday's news since we haven't seen it yet. It gives us a chance to actually spread out on important issues with important players in the community, and the Colonel is certainly one of them. So with no further ado, welcome in. Thanks for tuning in. Here's the headline that got everybody's attention big time, just a few working days ago, and here's a summary of the story.
There's no reason. I just felt it.
Colonel Stephen O'Donnell, in his retirement letter to the governor, says he's come to a crossroads in his life and career. As to why he's stepping down, the colonel tells us it was just a feeling he got over the past month.
So I went from maybe 100 miles an hour to maybe 95. I thought nobody noticed, but I felt it, and I just thought I want to be fully engaged.
O'Donnell reflected on his long career, showing us the photo IDs of the aliases he posed as while an undercover trooper. He infiltrated organized crime back then. In recent years, he's focused on cybercrime, the opioid crisis, and terrorism. But he tells us his greatest accomplishment is this.
I'm married and I have 3 kids. That's pretty successful in this business.
And he told us what he wishes he accomplished.
I would love to have another recruit class and take another shot at diversifying the state police better.
His passion for policing is evident in the way he speaks about the job he's leaving.
It's everything. It just is this outstanding uniform and Stetson as it looks, its appearance, but what it represents is so powerful. It represents 91 years of men and women that decided to do this and serve the people of Rhode Island. Some of them lost their life doing it.
And the Colonel is here. 2-week notice?
2.5 weeks.
You can wrap it all up in 2.5 weeks?
Well, you can't. I think to understand why, once you announce, you're sort of like dead man walking. So I knew the longer I stayed, the longer I'd be a distraction. It's just the way it is in our business, probably any business. So I thought the appropriate thing is the minimum is 2 weeks. That's how it's done. And I just said, I want to do it, and that's what I'm doing.
Well, listen, my instinct, of course, is not to just jump in and tease you. It is to congratulate you on an incredible career. I appreciate what you've represented with the state police. I think most Rhode Islanders, in a lot of ways, breathe a sigh of relief with the state police. You're not a perfect organization. No organization is. But I always use the phrase, and I've used it my entire career here, it seems like you're the last bus of integrity in a place that searches for it often. I'm talking about the organization, and I think you've run it in a way that makes people feel good about that, consistent with that kind of thought. So you've been a credit. I want to talk more about how you feel about the organization a little bit later on in the program, but let's get to some of the nitty-gritty. I'm not looking to break your Pulitzer here, so I won't press you too hard. But was there something that brought you from the 100 to 95% that wore you down in this whole thing?
Well, if you know me, it takes a lot to wear me down. I go pretty hard. No, it's just a combination of life. I've been doing this for 33 years. Always thought I could do it forever. And anybody worth their salt in this business, and I'm around the country talking to peers of mine all the time on committees and whatnot. I hear it all the time. How long are you going to do this? I don't know. And then they say, you'll just know. And if you probably talk to other leaders, they'll tell you the same thing. You just know. So there's always bumps in the road relationships. As you know, nothing's perfect. So, but of anything of substance more than the day-to-day grind or who disagrees with who, that happens all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. So no, to me, I'm smart enough, or maybe we're not intelligent enough, but streetwise enough to know I have good instincts, good feelings, and I just got a feeling. And I said, I have a 90-plus-year-old dad who's always told me, listen to your instincts. And to the date, he'll tell you to do that. So I did, and there's no major event. It's just think of the way you described it, you get beat down. No, it's not beat down. It's just when you realize that how effective I can be at the top. I don't want to be minimally effective. I don't want to be moderately effective. I want to be fully effective. And I can't, if I didn't feel that, which is 100%, then it was my time to go.
Is it a series of, this happens, by the way, this happens to everybody in every career. I mean, hell, I've been in this business for professionally for 36, 37 years. You think there isn't a day or 2 or 10 where I wake up and say, I really don't want to talk to you guys on the radio or the television. I mean, it happened. Then the next day you say, come on, you love this. Did you have an interval of, or was it one day you woke up and said, you know what?
Well, probably a combination of both. It's and don't make mistake about it that there is how do you explain it? There is exactly what you described that happens in the workplace everywhere, inside, outside, and there's many things that come in and out of our organization. But no, there is so much that happens, and that day happened. I just felt that, and I thought about it, and then actually went and discussed it. When you're talking to people that don't understand it, they're not going to grasp it. What are you talking about? Because they're doing something different at a different pace. And so I said, this is what I'm thinking about. And no, you're fine. And I was fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I was pretty sure, knowing me, I always put things back in the athletic perspective. I wouldn't say I'm an athlete, but I'm a former athlete, and I coach athletes. And when one of my players isn't performing, he might not see it or he sees it. I've had actually players, coach, take me out. That is stronger than coach put me in. Because some kids will play hurt with their legs falling off. So that's how I felt that maybe I saw that I'd still be effective. But to the level of effectiveness that I want to be at anything I do, if it's state police or my next life, I want to be fully engaged.
What is the definition of effectiveness in running the state police then?
That's a good question. It's a high octane job. It's busy. And again, it can be as busy as you want. But you can't let anything go by the board. There's nothing that you should not understand is happening. It's an unbelievable place, by the way, with the men and women that work there. That's the easiest part of the state police, honestly. That building you see, the inner workings, cases, all the things you see about the homicide the other day, those are easy things to work. It's all the other things about budgets and management and human resource. We have 640 employees. So multiply that by issues they have with their families and people that die and pass away. All the things that you do in a family, and it takes time. I probably go to a funeral twice a week. Somebody within that family wakes. So it's just the pace. Even this week, it's every night I'm somewhere. And I don't mind doing that, but the effectiveness is when you feel that the organization is at top of its game. I'm not sure everybody else feels what you feel. I think the citizens of Rhode Island really believe in the state police, but I don't know if everybody else believes in that, the same level of passion and commitment to the Rhode Island State Police. It's just the nature of the beast. I don't see us as just another organization. And to be effective, to answer your question, is that leader has to believe that you are the best group there. Not because you're the best group of people, of course you're not. You're different, but you want to make sure that the people, this is what I'm going to explain. At the end of the day, law enforcement's changed. In 2016, you watch it. All the stuff that happens in Baton Rouge, Dallas, and wherever else it may be, San Bernardino, Tampa, the shooters and policemen being targeted and sometimes being vilified improperly. So all that coming into it, I'm not sure, and I'm not talking about government alone, I'm just talking about there is a certain groundswell of anti-police sentiment that really isn't true. And so you almost feel like you're fighting that fight all the time, trying to tell people. I shouldn't have to tell people that these guys are great. Certainly, and you hit on the head before, we do make mistakes, there's no question. But if you're a police officer, think about this in America, you gotta be right all the time. On this show, if you make a mistake, you might not lose your life. You might not lose your job. In that world, you could. And that's how we train, that's how we believe. So when you see other things happening, and that beats you down a little bit, I'm well read around the country when you read other articles about different police departments. And I just felt at that point, I want to make sure that I am maximizing the potential of state police, then turn it over to the next leader.
All right, listen. I don't know if you're hearing what I'm hearing, but I'm hearing something, and we're going to pursue that when we come back. Stay with us. In Scituate, the state police barracks, of course, the guy who's been running the show there for, remind me, I forgot my note. You started there as the superintendent.
In May of 11, so about 5.5 years.
And of course, let's not forget, you had left and retired from the state police and became a federal marshal. I remember the ceremony like it was yesterday. And you were only in that gig for
18 months.
18 months until the opportunity came to replace a very good friend of yours who ended up running for Congress. Are you running for anything, by the way?
Never.
Is that an emphatic
That's
never?
an emphatic, never ever.
I was hearing something in the last segment, and I'm not looking to find trouble where it doesn't exist, but I think I'm hearing from you that you believe, not only in the context of law enforcement, that the state police of Rhode Island stand at a very high level, but that government needs to not only recognize out of respect but out of funding that the state police needs to operate at a really high level. This is really interesting. To put this headline up, and just as after you said you were going, the second in command decides he's going. Now, you know, his clock is run out. He has a chance. Actually, he's leaving 6 months prior to his mandatory retirement date, correct? Is that?
Yes.
Let me jump ahead to that. Is there a reason other than he's just exhausted as well?
Yeah, I think that's better coming from him, but it's not appropriate for me to opine.
Sure.
I mean, he's a person that can tell you, but what I would tell you is he's an unbelievable guy. Anybody that comes to that position is usually pretty high level, his whole background, but he decided a couple weeks ago that he was going to move on.
All right, so Todd Catlow retires as well. Are you worried about the command staff at this point with two major players stepping away?
No, and I think it's the beauty of it. You might think that, but it's a vacuum is created, certainly, but the leadership that you have there is 13 members of command staff, 14 including me. So one leaves. It's not unusual. How we explain this is the class of 92 has to retire in March of mandatory in 2017. So 3 of them will leave at the same time if they make max, but most of them, I think there's 10 left of 30. Then the class of 94 has 5 more years. So my point is they leave. Like I left with 23 years on. Most of us, a good percentage of us leave well before their maturation date because they get employed, they do something else, or they decide to move on. It's the very common theme in state police. So no, the void in leadership is there. The entire agency is full of leaders, from really the brand new trooper, obviously not polished up enough or trained enough to be in command levels, but there's just people lying in wait, and I mean that in a good way. They're just good, solid people. Happened to me. When I got promoted, I had the opportunity. So they'll step into that void, and they'll run the place probably better than I ran it.
There's a discussion, the governor is talking about a search outside of Rhode Island, outside the actual state police rank and file for its new leader. Support that?
I certainly support the idea that the governor has every right to make the decision she makes. But as a state police career person, knowing this culture, there's nobody that could walk into this job that's not a sworn member to fully understand the culture, in my opinion. So you have not just the entire group of people, leaders, so I would think, my opinion is, should come with inside. And by the way, and I'm fully supportive of Lieutenant Colonel Barry. That's a good young leader, solid, but again, I respect it's the governor's decision.
And Lieutenant Colonel Barry's running the will be running the place on an interim basis. It doesn't pay enough.
Well, I agree with that, but that's not my fight. When I came back from...
Did it impact your decision?
To leave?
Yeah.
Oh no, because if you know, I was making double the money I was making being a U.S. Marshal. I don't think that drives most people. I can certainly tell you it doesn't drive anybody within this culture.
It pays about $150, right? $150,000. I'm very surprised that there are other troopers, command staff, making more money than the superintendent, correct?
Yes, the difference is when the union gets a raise, typically over the course of our careers and our history, they get a similar raise, if not the same. The colonel is by statute. In March of every year, the governor, any governor who sits, would have to ask the General Assembly to give that person a raise. That hasn't happened in 14 years. It hasn't happened to A.T. Wall in 14 years.
Did you have discussions about increased compensation, not only for you, but for the position?
Believe it or not, only last year when the other directors got raises, you know, it's a natural conversation, but that's not what drove me. If someone felt they needed to give me a raise, which everybody that's in control of that knows it, I never took the job for money. So if that was the case, I wouldn't have done it in the first place.
I would think, though, that whoever takes that job, even if it comes from the inside, Lieutenant Colonel Barry is making more money than that, is he not?
It's true, but
Well,
the point is, I hear loud and clear that they should. The state police colonel is the state police colonel. He's also the public safety commissioner, and he's also the Homeland Security advisor. So if you look at across other states, they're each individual entities that pay legitimate money. So if that's the way it should be as a state police colonel, but it's not. And for me, it never came up in conversation. It's there. It's one of those things you don't talk about. But last year, all the directors, and all the directors are underpaid. And that's something that, if you're going to recruit proper talent, you should pay them the amount of money.
There's been a creation, am I correct, that the Homeland Security head now is a newly created position, unfilled, that the governor is
Well,
putting together?
it's cyber. It's like a cyber position / Homeland Security advisor. So it's out there. It's totally different from just the governor's Homeland Security advisor. It has a lot to do with cyber. The governor put together the Cyber Commission, and one of the intended consequences of it was this: trying to bring somebody in. So if they could help alleviate the work we do, and that person's job would really, they won't work for us. They work at DOA, but they'd be assigned to us through our Fusion Center to help work on cyber. The goal with cyber, really, and it's a good idea, a good initiative, is to bring that technology to Rhode Island, have like a cyber unit that works with our cyber team, our cyber disruption team, to bring in these high-end people, and maybe you can create jobs and you can do high-end training. One, to make our system more resilient, and what's the word? The word slips me, but that could trickle out into something good, not just for jobs, but education. You can tap into Salve, Roger Williams, Brown, those other schools to take those cyber experts and help us.
Let's clear this up. I get little dimes dropped all the time. Colonel O'Donnell is going to take that job. You have a state pension. I don't think you can.
No, you can't. There's so many rumors that someone called me, someone from the media asked, I am not taking a state job. One, it's against the law, so it's not going to happen.
Overall, though, it seems to me that whether it's an inside or outside hire, the governor's going to have to increase the compensation for the superintendency. Yes? No?
Yes, I think you should. I'm not here to pressure anybody, but it's across the board. If you look at Massachusetts, Connecticut, like everybody does, the comparisons, the Colonel of State Police in Massachusetts makes quite a bit more.
Are you playing a formal role in choosing the next superintendent?
Yes. Yes, I talk to the governor every day, and she's committed to using me as counsel. She'll have all the people that she decides that comes and apply, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out, either through a committee or informally, but I'm certainly talking to her every day about
But that you've suggested that it ought to be in-house. In a way, you properly or improperly, depending on how you look at it, biased your input.
Well, I think bias is probably not a good word.
Well, you have a prism that you look through.
No, not really. I think knowing the culture and knowing look, I don't know who's applying. No one's talked to me except Colonel Barry. So if Colonel Barry is the only applicant, and certainly he's the highest ranking applicant, he's competent to do it. And not just competent, he's culturally competent. And there's a big difference. And he's bright. He's got good ideas, good energy, like I thought I was, like the previous superintendent. And they understand that. They're connected to everybody. And it just makes it easier. The typical fashion, and I don't make the decision, if you have all these problems when you have a scandal or you have something that's so crazy, out. But you have a steady group of leaders, and it's untapped right there. There's no reason, in my opinion, but again, I don't make the decision, and I'm not trying to force it, but that is a quality person that understands culturally where we're at and where we're going, and we also have a group of retired people that we message.
By the way, his interim nature, was it your advice that he be the interim?
I had a conversation about the governor, and she made a decision between both lieutenant colonels based on one lieutenant colonel could stay 5 months, the other one could stay 5 years.
Got it.
And she thought it was just better that having someone that was staying, and that's her decision, and she's in charge of the state police.
All right. Well, we'll talk about. There's so much to talk about with the colonel. We have one more segment. We're going to talk about diversity, and he's worked really hard in the community on that. But let me just want to remind you, if you're thinking about remodeling your kitchen or your bath, Cumberland Kitchen Bath Design Center would be a great place for you to do it. It certainly was great for me. Their project to redo the kitchen was on time and on budget. And if you're looking for before and after photos for a little bit of confidence as to how your project might just turn out, go to their website at cumberlandkitchen.com or check in with them 6 days a week. They're open on Mendon Road across from Exit 10. We'll finish up with the Colonel next. Stay with us.
That doesn't preclude that somebody inside the present Rhode Island State Police could not get the job, but they would have to compete. If that person was the best person, I think that would be ideal, but I don't want to have a person of color or woman just because they're a person of color or a woman. Clearly, there are people of color and women that are heading state police departments around the country that perhaps would be strong candidates.
Thus begins some of the conversation that'll happen for the replacement. Diversity in the leadership of the state police versus the work that you've been doing in the community. Is there a connection between the two? Because you have been out there working days and nights trying to, and I think effectively, and I think Jim Vincent would agree, and so others in the minority leadership community would agree, that you've broken down a lot of barriers.
Yes, it's a great compliment. Listen to them, and I hate that word. I'm actually at a forum tonight talking to people. I think what the groundswell is, you got to find a diverse workforce, no matter where you are. And how do you do that? I think some of the communities have told me that you don't want to pluck somebody and put them in just to do it. I think Jim just said that. What they tell me is they want to have the same opportunity. What I listen and resonates well is if you're Steve O'Donnell and you grew up in Providence, there's a chance somewhere in your culture you're going to meet a trooper, or you're going to know a trooper, and you're going to understand what they're about. But if you come from a different community, you may not ever know that, and it's hard to understand unless you live it. So they're not going to gravitate to that career. For me, I met a trooper when I was 16. I said, that's what I want to do. It's exactly how it was. He was a squared away looking person, and I never saw a trooper except on TV because I grew up in Providence. So that's what we're trying to do, get them to see us, feel us, shake hands, understand it's not just a law enforcement piece, it's a cultural piece. So the more we do that, I think the better off we'll get a greater pool, and then they understand our culture. It's important that we bring people to the level that we have, and we don't go down that level. And it's more important for them to do the same thing. And they'll tell you that. We don't want a free ride. We want to make sure that we're qualified, competent, and meet the rules.
Well, you're not a mushy guy, and I don't want to make this the last conversation because I'm going to tap into your expertise as you go. Wish you the best of luck. You don't know what you're doing yet, do you? Just going to relax for a while, coach a little lacrosse, chill?
It depends on your definition of relax. So yes, I'm the last week of October, but the only good part of leaving is there are a lot of nice people out there that give you good greetings and entertain opportunities to work. I've never put my name out in the workforce except for the U.S. Marshals. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it. Whatever I do, I'll do it with some passion.
And so when people say, yeah, O'Donnell, he was a hell of a superintendent, he was, what do you want them to say in 15 seconds?
Fair. Just fair. Treat everybody fairly. I believe in it, but again, someone asked me my legacy. My legacy is someone else will tell you what it is. I don't know what it is.
There you go. Thanks for your work. Congratulations.
No, we're pretty proud of it. Have a very good place, and you know, everybody tells me there's a day in your life, and I'll resurface. There's a lot of good people out there that surprise you, because in this business, you go every day, day, night, weekends, holidays, and you don't really get a chance to go out to dinner with guys like you, or have lunch with somebody. I'm going to start doing that.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, I don't know if that was on.
No, that was great. Final word.
Oh, you're still live.
Alrighty, coming up on Monday, we'll take a look at a brand new education innovation model. Details to be explained. You have a great weekend. We'll get a new state police superintendent, and we'll follow the process along. My guess is it won't be resolved in a matter of a couple of months. There's going to be a lot of public discussion, and that will be good. In the end, we'll see if the Colonel's recommendation that it goes inside happens. Time will tell. Have a great weekend.